So, for the longest time, the Sixth Doctor was the era that I kind of found a little difficult to get into. I mean, when I started collecting Doctor Who, I mainly went for. I'd started with the last episodes, and the problem with that was that with the Sixth Doctor, his last episode, or his regeneration, wasn't really in his last episode, but more in Sylvester McCoy's first. So that kind of made it difficult. So for the longest time, I only actually managed to get my hands on two Sixth Doctor stories. Those being his first story, The Twin Dilemma, and the multi-Doctor story, The Two Doctors. But when I got Earthshock, I remember somebody stating on social media, if you get Earthshock, also try and get your hands on Attack of the Cybermen, as it's best. Those are two of the best Cybermen stories, so try and get those two together. Well, after I got Earthshock last month, I felt, yeah, okay. So I decided to get Attack of the Cybermen. Attack of the Cybermen was a two-part story, and the first serial of season 22 of Doctor Who, first broadcast on the 5th and 12th of January 1985. And while I admit, while the Twin Dilemma was Colin Baker's first story, I think if you want a show of how the Sixth Doctor really works, and how true and good of a guy he can be, Attack of the Cybermen I think is really the way to go. So the Doctor, played at this point in time by actor Colin Baker, and his companion Perry Brown, played by Nicola Bryant, the Doctor briefly manages to repair the TARDIS's chameleon circuit, and to try and kind of calm Perry down a bit and give her something actually nice, he takes her to see Halley's Comet as it passes by Earth. Yeah, which is, it's a nice thing to do, when they suddenly get an SOS call from Earth. Now, they head to Earth and try and track down what the problem is. Now, there's a group of guys led by a man named Lytton, played by Maurice Colburn. Now, he supposedly appeared in the Fifth Doctor story, Resurrection of the Daleks. Now, that one I haven't seen yet, so I can't make a judgment of his character from that, but he apparently is a returning character. And he appears to be leading a heist. Essentially, he plans to rob a building and rob essentially a diamond exchange in order to get a load of diamonds and, well, essentially become rich. But that's only his cover story, the thing to get his crew interested, to which one of the crew is actually played by Brian Glover, which I didn't recognise him, but apparently some people do, so yeah, nothing to mention there. What he actually plans to do is release a group of Cybermen in the sewers underneath London. And it ultimately comes that this is a Cybermen plot. The year is 1985, same year that the episode is being debuted, and they want to stop something that in the original Doctor Who timeline happened in 1986. And they plan to do that from the planet Telos. Now, Telos previously appeared in the second Doctor story, The Tomb of the Cybermen, and the Cybermen want to stop the events of the 10th planet. In the original story, The 10th Planet, which I have done a review of, you can check it out. In the original storyline, that's the first Cybermen story, and eventually their planet Mondas is destroyed, but the Earth survives. Now they plan, working with elements from Telos, to essentially destroy the Earth before it can destroy Mondas. And ultimately the Doctor and Perry have to find a way to stop them. Now, Lytton isn't the only guy they come across. There's also two slaves who are working on Telos who are managing to escape and are trying to find a way to stop the Cybermen themselves, named Stratton and Bates, played by Jonathan David and Michael Atwell. Essentially what they plan to do is disguise themselves as a Cyberman and a prisoner to escort themselves inside the cyber base and cause problems, which is kind of nice to see. And there's also a group of creatures known as the Cryons, played by a variety of actresses, including Sarah Berger, Ethel Freud, Sarah Green, and Faith Brown. Now, I wasn't entirely sure what to make of the Cryons when I saw them. I mean, it's obviously the 80s. I mean, they've got the kind of weird costumes which are clearly made out of plastic and bubble wrap and cling film and the like. But they're also rather sinister. I mean, when Perry kind of wakes up and is talking to them, one of them says to the other, I told you we should have killed her when we first found her. I'm like, whoa, hang on. Are you guys evil? But no, they actually go through the entire story, they're not evil, they're maybe just a little detached. death from humanity, and they've actually got a rather nice kind of flaw in them in that they can't survive out of sub-zero temperatures. So basically Doctor Who's answer to Mr. Freeze, which I thought was a rather nice touch. I mean, they're saying we can't leave these rooms because if we do, the temperature will get too high and we'll essentially disintegrate. Which the disintegration effects they use on them, they're a little 80s, shall we say, but they're also kind of cool. They also have a kind of like a substance, like a granular substance that the Doctor finds that is mainly so cold that if it gets to 10 degrees, it's fairly dangerous. If it gets to 15 degrees, it self ignites, which is what they ultimately use to defeat the Cybermen, which I think is really very cool. The only problem I really have with this two-part story, if I'm being honest, is that the ending did seem a little rushed, a little haphazard. Listen ends up being captured by the Cybermen, and in a rather gruesome scene, they try to make him tell them what he knows, and they essentially break his hands. And watching his hands bleed like that, just stood in that position, I'm like, ugh, blimey, Cybermen, that that's a bit extreme. But hey, what do you expect from the Cybermen? And go when the Doctor comes back, he finds them and tries to free Listen, and he finds Listen, tries to free him, and then Listen says, "No, let me do something good," revealing he was actually working with the Cryons, not the Cybermen. And essentially, he kills one of the Cybermen by stabbing him with a knife that the Doctor had picked up from the control panel to try and go free Listen. And when I saw it, I was like, and when he suddenly stabbed the Cyberman, I was like, wait, hang on, what? I mean, I didn't know if the knife was made of gold, whether it had been set up in an earlier scene, and I just hadn't noticed. I eventually looked it up and found out that it was just something the Doctor had picked up to try and free him. But for a moment I was pretty confused, like, wait, is that knife made of gold? Is that, like, what's happening here? I mean, that's the only thing I'd really say against it. But once again, it does have some nice touches. I mean, when the Doctor repairs the chameleon circuit at the start of the story, I don't think we want to see the TARDIS chameleon circuit repaired for long, because, well, come on, the TARDIS is probably one of the most iconic pieces of the show. But when they land inside a scrapyard, I was like, no, give her a minute, she's thinking about it. She turns from a police box into a dresser, a floral ornamental dresser. Where he's like, yeah, very good. It's like, well, she hasn't done it in a while, she's had to practice. And then when they land nearer the base later on, it turns into a pipe organ. It's like, yeah, this really isn't very good in it. Before, at the end of the story, ultimately reverting back to the police box status. Which, yeah, I don't think we'd want the TARDIS chameleon circuit fixed for long. I think it's better as a blue police box. So, what do I think of... This is one that I saw also people are divided on. Some say it's one of the great Doctor Who episodes. They think it's the best of Colin Baker's era. Others say it's a little haphazard and they don't really like the score. I can see both sides of it. I do think it's cheesy, especially for the 80s, but you know what? While the Twin Dilemma was his first, I think this is the true introduction of Colin Baker's Doctor, showing what he's like. He's a little prickly, but he can also be fun, and he will ultimately save the day. So, yeah, I'd give Attack of the Cybermen a pass on this occasion. I think it's a good one. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. So, that was the second story of the 3 new Doctor Who stories I managed to get. First was Fury from the Deep, then Attack of the Cybermen. The last one I've got to review for this point in time is Revelation of the Daleks. What do I think of that one? Well, I hope to watch it later today, and when I do, I'll let you know. Anyway, until then, see ya.